the Sergeant Vance, I think. Markers. These all represent casings collected. All the 40 caliber casings from the guns of Mattingly and Cosgrove, because that's where they were when they shot from the line of fire. And here, marker 37 is the bullet that was collected, that was identified by the FBI firearms examiner Bryce Ziegler, this bullet here, as having been fired from the 9mm found under the bed in the south bedroom of apartment 4. The bullet that went through Mattingly's leg and ended up right here. The rest of these markers are all casings that were ejected by the guns of Mattingly and Cosgrove, because they were the ones in the line of fire, not this defendant. He was over here, shooting wildly through sliding glass doors covered with vertical blinds and drapes. Now, in the daylight the next day, when that picture counsel showed you of the bedroom window with the black drape, that was taken the next day in the daylight. And he wanted you to see or believe that you could see through it, because, oh, by now it has bullet holes in it. And it's daylight, so yes, you can see daylight through the bullet holes the next day. But not that night. Next photo. These markers are the defendant's casings. Every one of these, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 is under the tire, 10. Here is the sliding door with the bullet holes in it, and the window with 5 bullet holes. 5 bullet holes in the sliding door and 5 bullet holes in the window. And here's the casings. These up here in the gravel were testified about by Sergeant Vance that were weathered casings, and you may have noticed some when you were out there that were laying and had been there a while. So these up here in the gravel were not relevant. These, all in the parking lot, were identified by Kentucky State Police Examiner Stephen Hughes as having been fired from the defendant's service weapon. Every one of these casings was a positive identification by Stephen Hughes with Hankison's .40 caliber Glock. Next slide. And here's 2 more. This is not a casing. This was a magazine that was dropped. 1 and 3, marker 1 and 3, are 2 more of Hankison's casings, both identified as positively having been fired from his service weapon. Next slide. Again, 1, 3, and now you can see marker 4 between the 2 vehicles in the parking lot, another casing that was positively identified as having been fired from Hankison's gun. Next slide. Close-up of the sliding doors. Now, obviously, we can see through them now because the curtains are pulled back, the blinds have been pulled back so that they can see the bullet hole, the bullet defect. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And shattered glass. Next. Now this, we're going to follow the pattern of those 5 bullet holes we just saw. So this is taken from the inside, of course, and they have pulled the curtains back, and you can see the bullet defects in those. Here you can see some of the blinds that had been broken down during the shooting. And you can see shattered glass here, but some of the vertical blinds that are now laying on the floor. Next. Now, the bullets have been shot through the sliding glass doors, and here is where they went through the wall that's straight ahead, looking through the sliding doors. This wall is straight ahead. So this is the common wall with apartment 3. And we have one defect here, which this bullet is the one that ended up falling down and was laying on the carpet. So that's that one there that was collected. And later identified by FBI examiner Ziegler, he described it as a bullet jacket that was found here. It didn't make it through, and he identified it positively as having been fired from Hankison's gun. So that's one. And then we have 2, 3, 4 bullet holes here. Next slide. And now we can see the 5th one. First one was the chair. Now we can see 2, 3, 4, 5 holes going into the wall. And next. And now we can see the trajectory rods that Examiner Van Arsdale, who created the graphic, during his work, he was measuring from the entry hole into this wall through to the drywall of apartment 3, where he could still see, even though the drywall had been repaired in apartment 3, he could still see where the hole had been in order to make this trajectory. These are the 2 clock defects right here, which you'll see on the other side. And then you'll see this one. This hole here is one that the bullet ended up in the stud. So this is the stud, and the bullet was pulled out of the stud by the FBI, and it was identified by firearms examiner Ziegler as having been positively fired from the defendant Hankison's gun. This one. These 3, this one, these are the 2 clock ones you'll see, and then this is the one that went straight through to the chair rail or bumper on the other side of the wall. Next. So now this is apartment 3, where they have come through the bullets. It's a mirror image of the other wall. So here's the clock, defect here, or bullet coming through here, bullet coming through here. And then the 3rd one will be the next slide. 3rd. So there's the chair rail in apartment 3 that mirrors the entry hole on apartment 4, and here's the exit on apartment 3. Now we'll see where this bullet, and there's this bullet, ends up on the dining room table of apartment 3 that came through over the chair rail. Next slide. Now the 2nd bullet that was found that came through one of the bullets came through the clock, we'll see in the next photo, hit up here and then dropped down on this carpet. Next slide. So here is the bullet. One of the bullets that came through the clock and then hit up above the sliding doors and then dropped down on the carpet. That's the 2nd bullet they retrieved from apartment 3. Next slide. And here is the hole in the vertical blind where one of the bullets that went through the clock kept on going, and that's where the one that probably almost hit Cody as he was walking through, It went all the way through the blind and shattered the sliding glass door. This other bullet from the clock ends up here, doesn't make it through, and falls back down on the carpet. So this is the one that shattered that door and left then it wide open with shattered glass everywhere. Next slide. The window bullets. This is the 5 window bullets. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. You can see here, this of course taken in daylight the next day. You see these are the horizontal blinds. Now you see how close those blinds are together? Well, those were down. There's defects in them now. And covered by the black curtain on the other side. Next photo. And here's the other side, where those bullets came through. Fired from here on the graphic. So 5 bullets were fired at that window. One of them you heard about was found, it came through and hit this dresser drawer and then ended up inside the dresser drawer. That's one. And the next. 2 more hit this wall as you're facing the window. It'd be the wall to the right. And there's the defects. And those 2 were later found in the wall by the FBI in the search in June. Those 2 were pulled out and they were tested by Bryce Ziegler and found to be a positive identification to Hankison's gun. These 2 bullets here pulled out of the wall. So that's 3 bullets so far from the window that were retrieved. Next slide. So here's the 4th one. This went into the utility closet in the hallway here. And there it is, the bullet right there. That was retrieved, and that was positively identified as having been fired from Hankison's gun. That one was retrieved during the crime scene unit search, and that one was identified by the state police as having been fired from the gun of Hankison. Next slide. And this is the 5th bullet through the window that was found in the soap dish. Obviously you don't see any defect behind it, but must have ricocheted from somewhere in here. And here it is, right there. The 5th bullet through the window. So we accounted for all 5 in the sliding door because we had the one that hit the chair and fell on the floor. That's 1. One that got stuck in the stud that was pulled out later. That's 2. And then 3 of the ones fired through the sliding door that went all the way into apartment 3. Those are the 3 important ones. Because any one of those 3, 2 that went through the clock, especially those 2 that went through the clock and then through the clock in apartment 3, and 1 all the way out the sliding door, could have any one of those. In fact, any one of the 3, even the one that went through the chair rail and ended up on the dining room table in apartment 3, could have taken another deflection. You know, who knows where it could have deflected out of that clock. Instead of going through the sliding door in there, could have gone into that bedroom where little Zayden had his head on the pillow. Next. And here is the 9mm that was found under the bed in apartment 4. Right here is the south bedroom, found under the bed. That was collected, tested by both the Kentucky State Police, the Kentucky State Police examiner, Mr. Hughes, made a positive identification of the casing found in the hallway. The casing found in the hallway was fired from this 9mm. One casing. One bullet was found in the breezeway, marker 37, that the FBI examiner, Mr. Ziegler, positively identified as having been fired from this 9mm. Next. And now we're back out to the front. And we see, again, the defects, the shattered glass, the railing up, or the balcony up here. Apartment 876. There's the Christmas tree that Cody Etherton told you they had set out in this bin, and that's where it ended up. Of the, you can see the relationship between the sliding door and the window. You definitely have to change position to start shooting, stop shooting from this sliding door and start shooting through the window. It wasn't all just one action. There had to be a position change. The continuing shooting blindly into the side of this building. There were no AR bullets found anywhere. Anywhere. There were no bullet defects in apartment 4. If this person was standing here with an AR shooting out, where are these defects? Who got shot with an AR? You didn't hear any testimony that any of these officers, including Mattingly, who did get shot, but who got shot with a 9mm, one bullet. Who came in and said they were shot with an AR? There was, Cosgrove was right there. Where's the bullet defects of all this AR shooting going on? And there was no bullet defects in these walls. There were no bullet defects bullet defects of exiting anywhere of an AR. There were bullet defects coming in from Mattingly and Cosgrove that went in to these walls that were fired from out here. Yeah. The reason there were no AR bullets and no AR bullet holes and nobody that got shot with an AR is because there was never one. When Lieutenant Vance interviewed the defendant, he couldn't remember which way the door opened. When Lieutenant Vance asked him in that interview, which way did that door open? He couldn't remember. It's in his statement. Which way did the door open? And he responded, I can't remember. That's because he was never in the doorway. The only ones who had ARs or long rifles in that night, the only ones were the patrol officers that he called out and told, we need long rifles, we need long rifles. So you know what that did? You know what that did when they all showed up with long rifles, the patrol, all out behind that first slide that shows the overhead of the complex. And you saw on the body camera of one of the patrol officers with the long rifle pointed at Cody, and he testified he was standing there with his hands out the window of the what used to be the sliding door, and they were pointing rifles at him, and there was a dog back there barking. He was afraid it was going to lunge at him. That put him at even more risk of serious physical injury or death caused by this defendant telling them to come out with long rifles. Now, I want to look at the instructions. There they were. Back here with the long rifles pointed at Cody. Instruction number 4, all the wanton endangerment ones are the same. That in this county on or about March 13th, for the finding of the indictment, he discharged bullets from a handgun into apartment 4 that entered apartment 3, which was occupied by Cody Etherton. Now, this doesn't require, nowhere in this instruction are you going to find anything that says, that asks you to find that he knew that Cody Etherton, per se, was in that apartment, obviously. You are not required to find that he knew there was a man named Cody Etherton in that apartment. If that was the case, this would be an intentional crime, not a wanton endangerment. It would be some sort of intentional. B, that he thereby wantonly created a substantial danger of death or serious physical injury to Cody Etherton. That under the circumstances, such conduct manifested extreme indifference to the value of human life. Now, what, and you have a definition of wantonly, but I want to look at the, let's look at what this, how the evidence has proven this. First, the instruction says he wantonly created a substantial danger of death or serious physical injury and this would be to Cody, to Chelsea, and to Zayden for each count. And that under such circumstances, such conduct manifested extreme indifference to the value of human life. So how has the evidence established this? Go on to the next. So wantonly. The definition of wantonly states a person acts wantonly with respect to a result or circumstances when he is aware of and consciously disregards a substantial and unjustifiable risk that the result will occur or that the circumstances exist. And this risk must be of such nature and degree that disregard thereof constitutes a gross deviation from the standard of conduct that a reasonable person would observe. So, you have to find that he was aware of the risk of shooting blindly into this building. There's the building. Well, there's where the bullets went through, but the building, the side of the building, the front of the building, where there was no view, through the sliding glass doors and the window. That wantonly, he has to be aware of the risk. And how do we know he's aware of the risk of shooting blindly? Well, because he has 20 years of training as a police officer. He has 20 years of twice a year having to go to the range and sit through not only classroom instruction and simulators, but actual firing at the range, shooting at a silhouette target. Because that's where you're going to be using defensive force, deadly defensive force, is against a person who's a threat. So that's why they have silhouettes shaped like a human body. And he couldn't even tell you that after Officer Gelhausen explained, yes, we use the silhouette as the target in these exercises out on the range. And we call it LMPD blue because it's a blue color. So 20 years of training, he's aware of the risk of shooting when you don't have a target. And he consciously disregarded. He ignored that risk. He consciously disregarded it. And he shot wildly in the wrong direction. And a threat can be a muzzle flash. What did Officer Gelhausen tell you about that? Seeing a muzzle flash. It can be a threat, but it has to rise to the level of an active threat. It can't just be a threat. A threat is not something that requires that you shoot at it. It has to become an active threat. There has to be a person at the end with a gun that caused that muzzle flash. It has to be an active threat. Officer Gelhausen said, if a person is standing there with it, and you can see they've got a gun even down to their side, that's a threat, but it's not an active threat. You don't have a right to shoot somebody who's just standing there with a gun down to their side. And he told you. Now, if they raise it and point it at you, then you do have a right. That's an active threat. So he was aware of the risk of shooting blindly, and he disregarded that risk and shot wildly in the wrong direction. Next. He created a substantial danger of death or serious physical injury. Cody Etherton was at absolute risk of substantial danger of death or serious physical injury. And serious physical injury is defined for you. It's very straightforward. Chelsea was in substantial danger when those bullets came through. They could have deflected instead of hitting that clock and going straight through to the sliding door. Any one of those 3 bullets could have deflected off that clock and gone to Chelsea's bed. Or even as she stood up. Any one of those 3 bullets could have hit little Zayden in that bed closest to the line of fire where they did come through and go out the sliding deck. A little deviation in degree and angle of those bullets as they came through this wall and through that clock and any deviation in the angle as they deflected could have hit. 3 bullets came through. Any one of those 3 could have hit Cody, Chelsea, or little Zayden. Next slide. The circumstances. So, the instructions states that that he wantonly created substantial danger of death or serious physical injury, that under the circumstances, such conduct manifested extreme indifference to the value of human life. So what are the circumstances? Okay, the circumstances under which he fired wantonly. Well, you have a 16-plex building, as I went through with that overhead, and you're driving through there, you can obviously see all these apartment buildings, and you drive right past two of them. You drive right past the ones that you're at the back, and you see, oh, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And then you drive around, and you see, oh, here's the front. And 8 more in the front. 8 in the back, 8 in the front. More circumstances. Testimony from the defendant himself. I told him, this is him telling Mr. Sarpy, I told him to go back in numerous times. His focus, when everybody else was focused on that door, on the knocking, on trying to get a response so they could peacefully serve the search warrant. When everybody else is focused on the job at hand, he is talking and arguing with Mr. Sarpy upstairs, taking the focus off. Mike Nobles, the one with the ram who's got the most important job at that time. Mike Nobles, the most important job, he's the one with the ram, and then they said, go ahead. He didn't want to have to use that ram. Mike Nobles, this distracted us, the argument with Sarpy, took our focus off the door. More circumstances, next slide. He's the one that directed the patrol to bring long rifles. Cody was in more danger with rifles in the back. More circumstances. His wild shooting with no target, with no reason, put fellow officers in jeopardy. His shooting from this sliding door, while they're still here in the fatal funnel, he was never in the fatal funnel, ladies and gentlemen. He was out here. His shooting wildly through this sliding door put his own fellow officers at risk. Look at this angle. They're still in the fatal funnel. Circumstances, the doors in the breezeway are clearly visible. A trained officer, trained 20 years to observe his surroundings, especially in a situation like this. What you won't find in the instructions is anything that requires you to find a motive. You're not required to find or know why he did this. You won't find that in there. You won't find anything in the instructions requiring you to find or consider whether he acted in self-defense or whether he acted in defense of another. You won't find that in the instructions because that, once again, would have required an intentional shooting. That may be something that would have been applicable to those that were in the fatal funnel who did shoot back intentionally. You won't find in these instructions anything that requires you to decide why he did this. And the facts are, he actually came in here and told you that he was standing on the doormat and saw the flash straight ahead in the hallway, and then when the hallway lit up, he saw a figure with a in a tactical stance with a long rifle. He actually came in here and told you that he was the one standing in the doorway and saw the shooter. Okay, well, the fact is that didn't happen. Because if he had been there, he would have shot then with a real active threat in front of him. Like you heard Mattingly and Cosgrove, who were the ones there, who were in the fatal funnel, who did take fire, who did take a bullet and fired back. If he had been the one standing there instead of Mattingly and Cosgrove, yeah, we wouldn't be here. It may be in another situation, but it wouldn't be. He may be in another situation, but we wouldn't be here. He was never in the line of fire. You do not have to find why he did this. Next slide. His wanton conduct could have multiplied one tragic death, Breonna Taylor. His wanton conduct could have multiplied her death by 3. Easily. This is what this case is about. This is who it's about. By grace, they're still alive. I ask that you find, based on this evidence, that this defendant is guilty of wanton endangerment under the law of Kentucky for his conduct that night. Wanton endangerment of Cody, of Chelsea, and Zayden. Thank you.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, we are very glad to still have all 15 of you with us, but only 12 by law are able to deliberate this case. So we'll randomly draw out 3 of your number, and I will call those out. When you hear your number called, just please remain seated. Juror 289-5941, Juror 289-6551, Juror 289-5881. Do you solemnly swear to keep the jury together, to allow no one to discuss the case with them, and to not do so yourself?
I will.
All right, thank you. All right, for the 3 of you whose number I called, could you just raise your hands, the 3 that I called your number? All right, if the 3 of you will just remain seated, and then we'll let the other 12 of you go back to the jury room to begin your deliberations. You are released from the admonition that you're not to discuss the case with each other. Please discuss the case with each other fully. As I said, we'll send the exhibits and the original of the instructions back to you in just a few minutes. I believe your lunch is either here or on its way.
This year, if you want to have your lunch, the 3 that remains here, just wait and I'll bring them to you. All rise for the party of the ring.
To the three of you whose number was chosen, you may feel some relief, you may feel some disappointment. You've sat through this trial and you've been extremely attentive, taken lots of notes. But we do all appreciate so very much the time and attention that you have paid to this case. You have helped us get through this. We're in a pandemic, and yet all 15 of you were able to be here each and every day, and we certainly are relieved for that. You are also relieved of the obligation to not speak about the case. You may want to talk with the attorneys, you may not. It might be helpful to them to hear from you, but if you wish not to speak with the attorneys or the media or anyone else, you are certainly not required to, and they will understand. As Anthony said, we do have your lunches for you. If you prefer to be escorted out by Anthony, he will be happy to do that for you. So if you will, just remain seated. I'm going to release everyone now so that they can leave the courtroom, and we will get your lunches for you. Thank you again. All right, we will be in recess until we hear back from the jury. Counsel, if you would leave me your phone numbers so that I can reach you if you're not going to be staying in the building.